From the Center for Agricultural Profitability at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, this is Nebraska FARMcast, and I'm Ryan Evans. On this episode, we'll explore how a simple phone call sparked a movement to build a new kind of business model in Nebraska, one centered on worker ownership and community care. Cindy Houlden is a Cooperative Development Specialist with the Nebraska Cooperative Development Center here at Nebraska, and she's going to join me to share the story behind the Republican River Valley Homecare Cooperative, which is a worker-owned business recently incorporated in Arapahoe, Nebraska. And Cindy recently authored a new article on this very topic. You can read that at the link in the notes to this podcast or on the Center for Ag Profitability's website at cap.unl.edu. And it's also up, as we will hear, on the Nebraska Cooperative Development Center's website. That is ncdc.unl.edu. And with NCDC, again, a Cooperative Development Specialist, is Cindy Houlden, and I'm glad to welcome her back to the podcast. Thanks for being here, Cindy.
Thanks for having me, Ryan.
Yeah, so if we could start with the origin story, if you can walk us through, as I mentioned, that first phone call back in 2021 you wrote that led to the development of a home care worker cooperative in rural Nebraska.
Sure. So in the fall of 2021, we got a phone call from a lady who had relocated to Omaha, Nebraska from Washington State. And she wanted to know if we were aware of any home care businesses that were worker owned. We'd never even heard of the model. We work in co-ops, but this was something new to us. She had been a founding member and an employee of a worker owned co-op in Washington State. And because of her experience there, wanted to work for a similar type business. So we put our thinking caps on and made a couple phone calls specifically to the Washington State. It's Northwest Cooperative Development Center located in Washington State, who had assisted with the formation of the business she had worked for. And it kind of got the ball rolling of why didn't we have one here in Nebraska, and what would we need to do to form one here in Nebraska?
So in Arapahoe, you had the closure of the care facility there that created a serious gap in services. So how did that community respond, and how did the cooperative model then emerge as part of the solution?
So in December of 2021, Good Samaritan Village there in Arapahoe was closed, which left a gap in care for the residents of Arapahoe and also a gap in employment for the employees of the facility. We found out about the closure of the Arapahoe facility thanks to an article in the Omaha World Herald. And so I may have made a phone call again to the reporter and asked if she could connect us with the community leaders in Arapahoe, which she did do. So we got a phone call from one of the former employees and a community leader there in Arapahoe, and we just started a conversation with them of, we're exploring this model. Could we talk? Is this something we could do to help provide care in home as well as employment opportunities in Arapahoe, Nebraska? So again, it was just another phone call or series thereof.
Great. And then today, how is the Republican River Valley Home Care Cooperative doing?
Well, I'll back up a little bit. We did and we've talked about this on podcasts already. We did a Home Care Academy that summer of 2022. Arapahoe representatives did attend, as well as others across the state, but the Arapahoe community embraced it the best. They were really excited to have the conversation, and as happens in cooperative development, it takes time. It takes time to bring everybody together. Everybody's busy, and there's lots of questions and angst and back and forth that needs to occur. And so it took us 3 years to get to where we are today. We've made the most progress within the last year and a half. Welcomed a member to their team. Her name is Kathy, and everyone in Arapahoe knows Kathy. Kathy Bauer, she's a native and she's worked in the community, but she's the one that took it by the reins and said, okay, this is what I want to do, and this is how I want to do it. And we were able to connect her with national resources through the Cooperative Development Foundation and the National Home Care Initiative. And that helped them embrace the model, why owning your own entity with a group of your friends is better than working for someone else, and got them to their incorporation in April. They are now finally ready. We're so excited to use that word, finally ready to bring on new worker owners. They have 4 already, but they're ready and willing to welcome more, as well as more clients in the Arapahoe area. And they can service within 60 miles or of Arapahoe. So you don't have to live in Arapahoe. You could live in Beaver City, Holbrook, McCook, Cambridge, Elwood, you know, go east, Holdridge, so anyone along that Republican River Valley could be either a member or a client of the home care co-op. So they're doing great. We're at the scary time where it's time to jump, but they're ready for it.
That's so great. It's such a great story too. And I imagine that this is as we've talked about before, as I understand it, not an issue unique just to Arapahoe, but across rural Nebraska, right? Do you have an idea, or can you fill us in on kind of what the general picture is with care facilities in rural communities and access to care?
Actually, I can. If you go to our website, and it's under worker cooperatives, but we have on our home care cooperative projects page, we have a graphic that is courtesy of the Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services. And as of February 2025, there are a large number of communities that are without some type of a care facility. Specifically, 24 have no facility nor assisted living facilities. And in the past 4 years, 16 facilities have closed. The most recent one is in Loop City, which is north of Kearney. And then when you get even further down, if one facility would close, more than 50% of the Nebraska communities would no longer have a facility. And while a home care cooperative is different than a facility, people could be cared for in their homes. And so that's where this home care entity comes in, is there's no longer a facility in our county, but if we could provide the care in our home, then we don't have to move my loved one from, Furnace County to Gosper County. We don't have to drive 45 minutes to an hour to 2 hours to see our loved one. Because what we see happening, and this was happening in Arapahoe, is if my loved one has to be in Elwood at the care center, which is an amazing care center, and I have to visit them every day if I want to see them, I'm going to find myself moving to Elwood and leaving my community. And so it creates some population drain on rural communities. And then the other side of it is the jobs that are lost. There's people in these communities that work in those jobs. And so when the facility goes away, I no longer have a place to work. So I'm going to go work in the closest facility. Well, if I'm working there, I'm going to live there as well. I'm also going to send my children to school there, and I'm going to shop there. So it just creates this drain within our rural communities. And it seems so, well, not that big of a deal until you look at the numbers of individuals we're talking about.
Yeah, and it's really impressive just that the Nebraska Cooperative Development Center, you and your colleagues took this from a phone call to help bring it to reality. A credit to you at the center and the village or the people in Arapahoe as well. Just for listeners who are unfamiliar, what makes a worker cooperative different from other business structures? You've talked about it a little bit already, but if you could just quickly kind of give a summary of how it's different in terms of things like ownership and governance and just long-term sustainability.
Well, number one, a worker co-op is owned by the workers. So it's not owned by a corporate parent or a singular investor. It's owned by the people who work for the business. And what makes that unique is these individuals in Arapahoe get to make the decisions about how, where, and who their business operates with. And then after they are operating, the profits from their business stay in Arapahoe. They're not going to some corporate parent somewhere else. And you see a lot of home care entities within the state of Nebraska that are franchises. Well, that's great and wonderful. They're providing the service that's so necessary. But that franchise fee doesn't stay in their community, it leaves the community. And so there's a wealth drain that occurs. And that's what we like about the worker co-op model is it's local, it stays local. So it's creating local wealth thanks to local investment and providing local jobs. And so it's a really sustainable local small model that we like to introduce into communities.
And are there other challenges that home care workers typically face in Nebraska, other than maybe without the presence of a cooperative, just a lack of a job market? But are there other challenges that home care workers face that might be addressed differently by a cooperative model than a traditional employer?
There's lots of them. Traditionally, home care workers are one of the lowest paid professions within the healthcare industry. Um, they make barely above minimum wage. And think of Nebraska, our minimum wage currently is $13.50 an hour. It'll go up to 16 an hour. You're talking home care workers that are making between $14 and $16 an hour. So it's not a high wage job. Um, and but the client on the other side is charged more than that because you've got a corporate parent that needs to make profit. And so low wages is the number one issue we see. Additionally, is lack of control. So, I work for a home care entity. They tell me who I go and take care of. They tell me where I go and take care of them. I may be asked to use my own vehicle without being reimbursed for use of my vehicle. I may not be paid for my travel time. There's just a lot of things that occur within this industry that make high turnover occur. A home care co-op, because it's owned by the employees that are doing the work, can address some of those things. And because the profit doesn't have to go outside of the business to support a corporate parent, they tend to make higher wages. They tend to develop policies that are more worker friendly. So for example, I get paid to travel from client to client. I might get to choose my clients a little bit better. I get to set my hours, have a little more control over the hours I work. Conversations we've had in Arapahoe about vehicles and benefits and all the things that we can provide. It's easier to do if you're local and it's local control. And it suits the community. It's not some parent in South Dakota saying that Arapahoe, Nebraska needs to do XYZ. It's Arapahoe, Nebraska saying this is what works for Arapahoe. And we really like that local piece, that local control, because it's a unique model for our community. And there's a couple other home care entities that we've been in contact with just to pick their brains, and they practice this model themselves. They're locally started, locally owned, and locally run. They aren't incorporated as a co-op, but they've started their entities for the same reason. They wanted local control.
And beyond just home care cooperatives, what's the current landscape in Nebraska, or maybe the potential, or both, for the worker cooperative model to expand across sectors and communities in the state?
What's so exciting about the worker-owned model is, we've said before too, Ryan, any business can be a co-op. Well, any business that I could own could be worker-owned. You and I could go start a radio station and we'd be the co-owners. We could start a plumbing business, a printing business. We could have a web hosting business. We could clean houses. I'm not sure I want to do that one, but we could. We could have a taxi service, a bookstore, any business model that an individual can own, a group of individuals can own. And that group of individuals can be worker owners. And so it's a worker owned co-op. So, it sounds a little corny to say this, but, the sky's the limit. You and a couple of friends want to start a business, we could form it as a worker owned co-op.
How common is the model across Nebraska? Do you have an idea?
This is the first business that we're aware of that has incorporated as a worker-owned cooperative. Okay, Nebraska has ESOPs and we have worker-owned businesses. They do tend to incorporate the worker-owned businesses as LLCs. And partially because the model's just, it's never been really introduced. It's just been, you and I decided to start a radio station, so we just formed an LLC and it's our business. And there's nothing wrong with that model. This is just another way to approach it, to more formalize and be a co-op, take advantage of the tax benefits that cooperatives offer. It's not a pass-through for tax purposes like an LLC is. And just take advantage of the model and how it's beneficial.
And I know the Nebraska Cooperative Development Center is certainly on hand and available to help if somebody is interested in exploring this option. What's your advice for somebody if this perks their interest and says this might be have an application in my community where I live?
I think just give us a call, either Charlotte or myself. We'd love to talk to you about how we can introduce you into this model. We have connections through a couple of great organizations. One is DOWI, it's the Democracy at Work Institute, which is the Association of Worker-Owned Businesses. The other is a financing group called Jobs Worth Owning. Both of them are there to support any worker-owned business. We can connect you with those resources. We can connect you with our help, help you have conversations. We're just here to help you figure out what's the right model for your business. And we think this is one that could be really helpful.
Great. And the website for Nebraska Cooperative Development Center, again, is ncdc.unl.edu. I've been speaking with Cindy Houlden, who is a Cooperative Development Specialist with the Nebraska Cooperative Development Center. And they are based in the Department of Agricultural Economics here at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And you can find Cindy's article on home care cooperatives, especially the honing in on the one in Arapahoe, the Republican River Valley Home Care Cooperative, at our website, cap.unl.edu and ncdc.unl.edu. So Cindy, thanks so much for the time and the great work here and the great information.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Ryan. Love it.
Nebraska FARMcast is a production of the Center for Agricultural Profitability at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. For the latest research-based information and education resources to manage your farm or ranch operation, visit our website at cap.unl.edu. That's cap.unl.edu.